The pandemic is creating havoc in Russia. The health sector has been virtually brought to its knees, and officials are struggling to contain the outbreak of the infections. The people are also witnessing some unprecedented losses. Deaths related to COVID 19 are at an all time high in the country. Russia has lost nearly about 1,195 lives to the virus in just the last 24 hours. This is a record high that has crossed previous day's record of 1,189. Now, since last September, Russia has tallied new heights in terms of the death toll due to COVID 19. In the past month, the death rate due to COVID 19 has jumped over 35%, and the worrying part is that the local reports indicate that the unofficial counting reveals a much higher mortality rate. In the last 24 hours, over 40,000 people have tested positive for COVID 19. This is the second highest number of cases that have been reported in a span of a day. Russia has also witnessed a steady rise in terms of overall percentage of cases that have been recorded on a day-to-day basis, and the situation is now putting a lot of pressure on the health sector. Many health officials are also falling prey to the virus. There are many medical centers they are being forced to work with very limited assistance. To reduce the spread of the virus, the Russian President Vladimir Putin is ordered for a national-wide non-working period. This was set from 30th of October till 7th of November. The president even said that regions with dire situation could add more non-working days. Russia's surge in infections and deaths are being attributed to many other factors. Low vaccination rates, negligent public attitudes towards precautions, and government's reluctance to toughen restrictions. Less than 35% of Russians have been fully vaccinated. The inoculation rate still remains low, despite Russia being one of the first nations to approve vaccine against COVID 19. The domestically developed Sputnik vaccine is being used across Russia. The world is facing a chip shortage. Countries are announcing schemes to attract manufacturers of semiconductors. The latest in the series is Japan, that will create a scheme now to subsidize construction of domestic chip factories with a new plan planned by Taiwan's TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductors Manufacturing Company. It is likely to be the first recipient of this scheme. Reports said government will set aside several hundreds of billion yen under this year's supplementary budget to create a pool of funds at NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is a state-run body promoting research and development on energy and industrial technology. Under the scheme, companies will be eligible for subsidies on condition they ramp up chip production in times of short supply. Japan Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, he pledged to put economic security among his policy. Priorities include boosting domestic output of semiconductors. The government is likely to subsidize up to half of TSMC's estimated 1 trillion yen or $8.8 billion investment for building a chip plant in Kumamoto, southern Japan. The planned Kumamoto is expected to produce semiconductors for automobiles, camera, image sensors, and other products, which have been hit by a global chip shortage. It is likely to start operations in the next 3 years. Food security is a serious issue in China. In the past, the country has dealt with numerous famines and droughts, some so deadly that they have cemented a place in history, due to which the Chinese do not take food supply so lightly. However, in the last 1 week, a new concerning trend has emerged in the Chinese mainland. People are stocking essential supplies. They are fighting for food. Army biscuits and luncheon meats have become the most searched items online. Rice, soya sauce, chili sauce, noodles are trending on Alibaba. The top search on a search engine reads household stockpile list. The Chinese are stocking up. They are buying cabbages, rice, sauce. Vendors are running out of their backstock. This begs the question why? Why are people fighting for food in China? Is China running out of food? Or is there something worse in store? It all started last week. In a notice, China's Ministry of Commerce encouraged people to stock up. The notice asks local authorities to ensure that there are enough supply so that people can stock up. The question that now arises, why does Beijing want people to hold food supplies? There are multiple possibilities here. For starters, people fear that China might go into lockdown again. China is in the middle of a Delta outbreak. Daily infections have touched a 3-month high. Several Chinese cities are under lockdown. But it is very unlike the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, to risk its position by sending any sort of signal that can be read as a food emergency. China never asked its citizens to stock up even when it put millions under lockdown in 2020. Next reason could be confrontation with Taiwan. If Beijing gets into a war with Taiwan, it will find itself globally isolated with its supply chain cut. The final possibility is the recent spike in vegetable prices. Reports say in Beijing, vegetable prices are up at least 50% in many cases. They have become rarer than meat. Heavy rain have hit the agriculture province of Shandong. Crops have been ruined, supply chains have been disrupted, and now prices are soaring. There are numerous possibilities. The CCP has not issued a clarification. The government says that there are enough supplies, but one thing is for sure, it is unlike China to push a panic button on food security. Tuvalu, it is a country located in Pacific, happens to be one of the many island nations bearing the brunt of climate change. A minister from Tuvalu has decided to give a reality check to the world leaders talking climate action at Glasgow. He has sent a message to COP26 by standing knee-deep in seawater back home. The message will be broadcasted on 9th of November. But Simon Coffey is already famous on social media. The photo of him standing in a suit with his trousers legs rolled up has gone viral. What is Coffey expected to say at COP26? What reports say is the statement juxtaposes the COP26 setting with the real-time situations faced in Tuvalu due to the impact of climate change and sea level rise. Tuvalu is a Pacific nation and is at the forefront of climate change. Many of the countries from this region have not been able to send a representative to COP26. Why? Because of the Wuhan virus. Most of the island nations in this area managed to control the virus from China because of the early and strict border closures. Stepping out for Glasgow will cost a representative a month of quarantine. So a third of Pacific island nations today do not have a voice at COP26. The Tuvalu minister's video is expected to draw the much needed spotlight on the problems back home. It is expected to send a message to Glasgow. The climate action needs to be immediate, else many low-lying island nations will disappear. Take Marshall Island for example. A World Bank report in October said that the projected sea level rise could cost Marshall Islands its status as a nation. This video is expected to generate the waves capable of hitting hard against climate inaction. After a 5-month gap, talks aim to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal are set to resume once again. Iran's chief negotiator has confirmed that Talks will commence in Vienna on 29th of November. The indirect negotiations in Vienna come amid mounting pressure on Iran as it advances to its nuclear program to dangerous levels. EU envoy Enrique Mora, who led 6 rounds of talks earlier this year, will once again chair the November meeting. The Biden administration has said it will attend the meeting along with the remaining signatories, the UK, China, France, Germany and Russia. The President Joe Biden took office hoping to return to the 2015 nuclear agreements from which the US had exited because of his predecessor Donald Trump. But the path to rejoining has not been easy. Talks earlier this year failed to secure a breakthrough and then was put on hold as Iran held its presidential election, adding to US frustrations. Iran has also refused to meet directly with the US envoy Rob Malley, forcing European mediators, instead shuttling between hotels in Vienna. The US State Department said that US expects negotiations to pick up where they were left off in June. Under the 2015 agreement, Iran agreed to restrictions on its nuclear program, like how much uranium it could enrich, the amount it could stockpile, and also the type of machineries used to enrich. It also agreed to allow international inspections. All this in return for lifting of sanctions. But former President Trump exited the deal and reintroduced sanctions, prompting Iran to stay significantly beyond the limits set. In an unprecedented move by the United Arab Emirates, non-Muslims in Abu Dhabi will now be allowed to marry, divorce and get joint child custody under the civil law in a new decree issued by Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Like with all the other Gulf states, the personal status laws here are based on Islamic Sharia principles. The UAE aims to enhance the position and global competitiveness of the Emirates as one of the most attractive destinations for talent and skills. This is being described as a first of its kind reform, considered to be in line with international best practices. Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed is also the president of the UAE Federation of 7 Emirates. He says the law, which consists of about 20 articles, which covers civil marriages, divorce, alimony, joint child custody, and the proof of paternity and inheritance. In line with this, a new court will be set up in Abu Dhabi to manage non-Muslim family matters and will operate in both English and Arabic to facilitate better understanding of judicial procedures and also to ensure transparency. In the past year, UAE has announced a host of other legal reforms such as decriminalizing premarital relations, alcohol consumption, counseling provisions for leniency when dealing with honor killings, and even measures such as long-term visas. All of these reforms are being seen as a way for the Gulf states to attract foreign investments, tourism, and long-term residencies. Is the rapidly changing weather making you sick? Are you struggling to breathe during extreme summers? Is your health condition getting worse because of harsh winters? Well, you could be suffering from climate change. It is a real diagnosis now. Courtesy this man, Dr. Kyle Merritt. He practices at an emergency room in British Columbia. He is now making headlines for clinically diagnosing a patient with climate change. The patient is over 70 years old. She lives on a trailer somewhere in British Columbia. What are her symptoms? This woman has asthma. The record heat wave in Canada made it harder for her to breathe. The doctor knew what the problem was. It was rising temperature. But could he cure it? Not immediately and definitely not alone. So he wrote climate change on patient's chart. A lot of us too could be suffering from climate change. America's Center for Disease Control and Prevention says climate change can increase our cardiovascular diseases, exacerbate respiratory disease, even lead to injuries and premature deaths. Try to think about it. The link between climate change and ill health isn't all that complicated. Take the example of floods. The stagnant water gives rise to waterborne diseases. The extreme weather event also affect our mental health. Let's take the example of heat wave next. Extreme heat leads to heat rashes, heat cramps, and it can also lead to serious problems like heat strokes. We often ignore these problems. We blame them on the weather rather than climate change. This headline make diagnosing has now set to be precedent. We can choose to mock it, criticize it, laugh it off as a first world problem or indulge in our own boundaries. But here is something that cannot be overstated. The faster we learn, acknowledge the problem of climate change, faster we can go about addressing it. A warship gifted by rogue regime to a terror state. The gesture is symbolic. It is meant to enhance naval ties between two sides, but it is also alarming because the warship will be stationed in India's backyard with the aim of altering the balance of power in the Indian Ocean. The warship in question has been built by China. The recipient is Pakistan Navy. It was delivered in the last week. Pakistani officials got the warship at a commissioning ceremony held in Shanghai. And this is no ordinary warship. It is the latest and most advanced warship that China has built for any of its allies. The Global Times made a point of highlighting this in bold. It says the vessel is meant for peace and stability. Pakistan has named it the PSN Tagril. It was the name of a Turkish chieftain, the man who conquered Iran in the 9th century. Pakistan also named a missile. It named Babur, inspired by the Mughal Emperor Babur. But the missile suffered 2 consecutive failures before Islamabad could even testify it. Now this warship, they come with a reputation made in China. Look at the credential of this warship. Tagril is a Type 054 AP guided missile frigate, the best frigate in the service of China's PLA, People's Liberation Army. It is equipped with advanced radars and missiles and has a fully loaded displacement of about 4,000 metric tons. This warship is said to be capable of carrying out anti-aircraft, anti-missile and anti-submarine missions. It will also be Pakistan's first warship to be equipped with a vertical launch system. Tagril will be equipped with 32 missile launching cells. How much does the warship cost? China and Pakistan have not released any details, but the report estimates the cost to be anywhere between 300 to 350 million US dollars, and that is just for one unit. There are 3 more such frigates that Pakistan will receive from China, and they are all expected to be stationed at the port of Karachi right next to India's coastal lines. The sudden emergency of multiple seal carcasses is sounding an alarm among officials. Seal deaths are common during this time of year, but what has led to the sudden spike in the number? Is it pollution, malnutrition, or some other reasons? South African officials are investigating an alarming spike in seal deaths. Corpses of seal carcasses have been washing up on beaches in Cape Town and along the rugged coastal line north of the city. James Brandstein, a spokesman for the Western Cape Province Environment Department, said Seal deaths are considered normal at this time of year, but not to this extent. One of the early theories is that it might be malnutrition. Lots of seal carcasses are small and seem to be thin, so it might be due to malnutrition. The lack of food in oceans, but it is just theory. We hope to have further full clarity when the reports come back from the state veteran services. The provincial government said last week it had buried almost 200 seals. Experts believe an avian influenza epidemic affecting wild sea birds in the area is probably not behind the spate of seal deaths. Now, there is no denying that the world has witnessed a lot in the last 2 years. The pandemic should call existing structures, the plans, the way we lead our lives must have become a necessity in our lives. About 2 years ago, no one would have imagined wearing a mask day in and day out. But at present, those without one are looked upon. Now, this is undoubtedly necessary to take all precautions to protect oneself from the deadly virus. But this protection itself is proving to be harmful for the environment. A recent study published in the journal Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences states that 193 countries have created 8 million tons of waste during the pandemic, nearly 26,000 tons of which was pandemic-associated plastic waste that has swept into world's ocean, ending up on beaches and seabirds. The research titled Magnitude and Impact of Pandemic-Associated Plastic Waste started with a statement. I'm quoting this. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to an increased demand for single-use plastic that intensifies pressure on an already out-of-control global plastic waste problem. The researchers estimated that 87% of global COVID waste races back to the hospitals, not individuals. Nearly 8% of that waste is associated with individuals. Individuals use PPE kits. Other contributors are easy, one-time use plastic packaging and test kits, etc. During the pandemic, plastic has come up as an easy-to-use disposable material. From mask to face shield to gloves, everything contains plastic. A material long proven to be eaten by the planet and a fatal enemy of animals in marine life. The report also highlights that countries have not been able to handle the massive amount of plastic waste generated in the last few months. It notes that over 46% of COVID waste comes from Asia. The reason high number of mask using individuals present there seems like a good practice for humans, but not for the planet. The second biggest contributor is Europe, followed by South America, Africa, and then North America.